The Galactic Council chamber stretched across 3 kilometers of polished obsidian, its curved walls rising into darkness above. Representatives from 47 species sat in their designated atmospheric pods, each environment carefully controlled to suit their biological needs. The Zephyrians floated in their methane-rich spheres, while the crystalline Vorthack resonated softly in their silicon chambers. At the center of it all, Council Speaker Keflar adjusted his ceremonial robes with 4 of his 6 arms, his compound eyes scanning the assembled delegates. Today marked a historic moment. The first contact with a species called humans from a planet designated Earth in the Outer Rim territories. The initial probe data suggested they were bipedal mammals with basic spaceflight capabilities, recently discovered manipulating fusion reactions for energy. Nothing remarkable by galactic standards. The preliminary scans indicate they possess standard carbon-based physiology, announced science advisor Velterra, her serpentine form coiled around her speaking platform. Average height appears to be approximately 1.8 meters, standard gravitational adaptation, oxygen-nitrogen atmospheric requirements. Their technology level suggests they've achieved basic stellar navigation within their immediate solar system. Keflar nodded approvingly. Another peaceful integration into the galactic community seemed assured. In his 3 centuries as speaker, he'd overseen the peaceful incorporation of dozens of species. The pattern was always the same: initial contact, cultural exchange, gradual integration, and eventual full membership. The humans would likely follow the same predictable path. Their communication attempts show mathematical sequences and basic pictographs, continued Velterra. Standard first contact protocols should suffice. I recommend sending our usual diplomatic vessel with the standard welcome package. The Melodian representative, whose crystalline body chimed softly as she spoke, raised a concern. What about their military capabilities? Standard protocol requires assessment of potential threat levels. Velterra's scales rippled in what passed for amusement among her species. Negligible. They appear to use chemical propulsion for their spacecraft and primitive projectile weapons. Their largest vessels barely exceed 300 meters in length. We've cataloged no energy weapons beyond basic laser applications for industrial purposes. Murmurs of satisfaction rippled through the chamber. The Galactic Council prided itself on maintaining peace through overwhelming technological superiority combined with genuine diplomatic outreach. No species had ever posed a meaningful threat to the Council's authority, and none ever would. Very well, Keflar announced. Prepare the diplomatic vessel Harmony's call for departure. Ambassador Rixtau will lead the contact mission. Standard protocols, standard welcome procedures. Ambassador Rixtau, a tall humanoid with blue-tinged skin and an elongated skull indicating his Altarian heritage, bowed deeply. It will be my honor, Speaker. How many escorts should accompany the diplomatic vessel? None necessary. Keflar replied without hesitation. A single diplomatic ship should more than suffice for a primitive species. We don't want to appear threatening. 3 weeks later, the Harmony's call entered the Sol system, its sleek hull reflecting the distant sun's light. Ambassador Rixtau stood on the observation deck, reviewing his notes on human culture gathered from long-range surveillance. They appeared to be a fractured species, divided into numerous political entities across their homeworld. Wars were common but relatively small in scale. Their technology was crude but showed promise. Ambassador called his aide, a young cetacean whose aquatic tank allowed her to serve aboard starships. We're receiving multiple communication attempts from various human factions. As expected, route them all to the translation matrix and respond with standard first contact greetings. Inform them that we represent the Galactic Council and seek peaceful dialogue with their leadership. The next several hours proved frustrating. Unlike most species, humans seemed incapable of speaking with a unified voice. Different governments, organizations, and military groups all demanded separate audiences. The confusion multiplied when some human factions began arguing among themselves about who should represent their species. Perhaps we should have studied their sociology more carefully, muttered the aide. No matter, Rixtau replied. We'll arrange a neutral meeting ground. Earth's moon should suffice. Request representatives from their major political entities to meet us there. The meeting was scheduled for the following day. Rixtau expected a small delegation of scientists and diplomats, as was customary for first contact scenarios. Most species sent their finest minds and most experienced negotiators. He prepared his standard welcome presentation, complete with gifts of basic technology and an invitation to join the galactic community. The next morning, sensors detected multiple human vessels approaching the lunar surface. Rixtal frowned at the readings. Rather than the expected single diplomatic shuttle, humans were sending what appeared to be an entire fleet. Dozens of vessels of varying sizes emerged from Earth's gravity well. Aide, confirm these sensor readings. Are we certain these are all diplomatic vessels? The cetacean sonar clicking indicated deep concentration. Unknown, Ambassador. The vessels appear heavily armored and are broadcasting military identification codes. But they're also transmitting diplomatic clearance requests. Curious. Perhaps they simply don't distinguish between military and civilian vessels as clearly as more civilized species. The human fleet took position around the lunar meeting site with military precision that impressed even Rixtal's experienced crew. Whatever their technological limitations, humans clearly possessed tactical competence. The largest of their vessels established orbit directly above the designated meeting coordinates. Ambassador, the aide announced with barely concealed concern, we're receiving a communication from the lead human vessel. They're requesting permission to land. Of course. Standard protocol. Sir, I don't think you understand. They're not requesting permission to land a shuttle. They want to land the entire ship. Rixtal's elongated skull furrowed in confusion. The entire ship? That's unusual. Most species send small diplomatic craft to surface meetings. The vessel in question appears to be over 600 meters in length and masses approximately 50,000 tons. For the first time since arriving in the Sol system, Rixtal felt a flutter of unease. 600 meters exceeded the length of many Council military vessels. Are you certain these are civilians? They identify as the United Nations Space Command, which appears to be a joint military organization. But they insist their intentions are purely diplomatic. Rixtal considered his options. Refusing the meeting would violate diplomatic protocol and potentially create unnecessary tensions. Besides, what threat could a primitive species possibly pose to a Council vessel equipped with shields, energy weapons, and technology thousands of years more advanced? Grant permission for their landing. The human ship descended through the lunar atmosphere with surprising grace for such a massive vessel. Its hull was angular and aggressive, covered in what appeared to be armor plating and defensive weapons emplacements. Yet it touched down on the lunar surface with delicate precision, landing thrusters firing with mathematical exactness to avoid damaging the prepared meeting site. Impressive piloting for a primitive species, admitted the aide. Indeed, perhaps we've underestimated their spacefaring capabilities. A ramp extended from the human vessel's belly, and figures began emerging onto the lunar surface. Even from a distance, Rixtal could see they wore full environmental suits adapted for vacuum operations. Standard procedure for an oxygen-breathing species. What struck him as unusual was their formation. Rather than the loose grouping of academics and diplomats typical of first contact meetings, the humans moved with military precision. They established a perimeter around their landing craft, while a smaller group advanced toward the Council delegation. Ambassador, the aide called urgently, I'm detecting additional heat signatures aboard their vessel. Estimate at least 200 individuals remain inside. 200 individuals for a diplomatic mission seemed excessive, but Rixtal pushed aside his growing concerns. Many species brought large retinues to first contact meetings. It was often a matter of cultural pride or political necessity. The lead human approached the Council pavilion, and Rixtal got his first close look at their species. The being was tall by galactic standards, nearly 2 meters in height, with a broad frame suggesting significant physical strength. Its environmental suit appeared more heavily armored than strictly necessary for lunar operations. Through the suit's transparent faceplate, Rixtal observed typically mammalian features: bilateral eyes, central breathing apparatus, hair covering the top of the skull. The eyes held an intelligence that seemed to catalog every detail of the Council delegation and their equipment. Greetings. The human spoke through the translation matrix, its voice carrying an odd mixture of formality and barely restrained energy. I am Admiral Sarachon, representing the United Nations Space Command and the governments of Earth. We appreciate your willingness to meet with us. Admiral, a military title. Rixtal had expected to meet with diplomats, scientists, or political leaders. Instead, Earth had sent their military commander. The implications were concerning. Welcome, Admiral Chun. I am Ambassador Rixtal of the Galactic Council. We come in peace to welcome humanity into the greater galactic community. We're honored by your presence, Chun replied. Though I confess we're curious about the nature of this Galactic Council. Our observations suggest numerous civilizations exist beyond our solar system, but we detected no signs of unified governance. The Council represents over 10,000 species across 47 sectors, Rixtal explained proudly. We maintain peace and facilitate cooperation between all member civilizations. Chen's helmet turned slightly, and Rixtal caught sight of her expression through the faceplate. It was not the wonder or excitement typical of newly contacted species. Instead, her eyes held a calculating quality that reminded him uncomfortably of predatory species. 10,000 species, Chen repeated slowly. And they all joined willingly? Of course. The Council offers protection, technology sharing, and peaceful coexistence. No rational species would refuse such benefits. Protection from what? The question caught Rixtal off guard. In 47 peaceful integrations, no species had ever asked what they needed protection from. They simply accepted the Council's authority and the benefits of membership. From conflict, from the chaos of unregulated expansion, from the dangers of primitive warfare. Chen nodded thoughtfully. I see. And if a species were to refuse membership? That has never occurred, Rixtal replied honestly. Why would any civilization refuse peace and prosperity? Because some civilizations value independence more than security. The words hung in the thin lunar atmosphere like a challenge. Rixtal felt his diplomatic training kicking in, recognizing potential conflict and moving to defuse it. Admiral, I assure you that Council membership does not compromise independence. Member species maintain their cultures, their governments, their way of life. We simply provide guidance on interstellar matters. Guidance. Chen's voice carried a skeptical tone. What sort of guidance? Military forces are transferred to Council authority to prevent conflicts. Resource allocation is managed to ensure fair distribution. Population growth is regulated to prevent overexpansion. Standard procedures for maintaining galactic stability. The silence that followed lasted nearly 30 seconds. When Chen finally spoke, her voice had changed subtly. The diplomatic politeness remained, but underneath lay something harder. Admiral, Rixtal said quickly, perhaps we should focus on the immediate benefits of membership. The Council offers advanced technology, medical knowledge, and access to trade networks spanning the galaxy. In exchange for surrendering our military autonomy and submitting to external regulation of our resources and population. Ah yes, those are standard requirements for membership. Chun turned to confer with several other humans who had remained silently nearby throughout the conversation. Their communication occurred over private channels, leaving the Council delegation unable to monitor the discussion. When Chun turned back, her posture had shifted in ways Rixtal found difficult to interpret. Ambassador, I think there may be a fundamental misunderstanding about humanity's interests in this meeting. How so? You seem to be operating under the assumption that Earth seeks to join your Council, that we require your protection or guidance, that we would willingly surrender our independence in exchange for technology and trade agreements. Rixtal's confusion was genuine. Is that not why you agreed to this meeting? No, Ambassador. We agreed to this meeting to assess whether your Galactic Council represents a threat to human independence and sovereignty. The word struck Rixtal like a physical blow. In 3 centuries of diplomatic service, no newly contacted species had ever expressed such sentiments. They either sought immediate membership or required gentle persuasion. None had ever questioned the Council's fundamental authority or suggested they might be seen as a threat. Admiral, I assure you that the Council poses no threat to any peaceful species. Define peaceful. Species that accept Council authority and contribute to galactic stability. So species that refuse to join your Council are by definition not peaceful? Rixtal realized he was walking into a diplomatic trap, but couldn't see a way around it. The Council has never encountered a species that refused membership after understanding the benefits. Because you've never offered membership to a species capable of refusing. The accusation hung between them like a weapon. Rixtal felt his aides nervous clicking behind him, recognizing the deteriorating situation. This was supposed to be a routine first contact, a simple integration of another primitive species. Instead, he found himself engaged in the most challenging diplomatic exchange of his career. Admiral, perhaps we should step back and discuss this more calmly. I am calm, Ambassador. Chen's voice carried absolute certainty. I'm also clear about humanity's position. Earth appreciates the Council's offer, but we must respectfully decline membership at this time. Decline? Rixtal's voice cracked with disbelief. Admiral, I don't think you understand what you're refusing. The Council's protection is not optional for species that develop interstellar capability. The galaxy is too dangerous for primitive civilizations to navigate alone. Are you saying membership is mandatory? Rixtal realized he'd made a critical error. The threat that usually remained implicit in Council negotiations had been stated openly. There was no diplomatic way to retreat from the position. The Council has a responsibility to maintain galactic peace and stability. We cannot allow primitive species to threaten that stability through unregulated expansion or resource competition. So membership is mandatory. Membership is inevitable. Chin turned again to her companions, and this time their discussion was brief. When she faced Rixtal again, her entire demeanor had changed. The diplomatic courtesy was gone, replaced by something that made the ambassador's skin crawl. Ambassador, I think this meeting is concluded. You should return to your ship and leave our solar system. Admiral, you don't seem to understand your position. The Council fleet maintains thousands of vessels throughout this sector. Your entire species exists at our sufferance. Is that a threat? It's a statement of fact. Chin nodded slowly. I see. In that case, I think there's something you should know about humanity. She gestured to her companions, who moved with sudden efficiency to positions around the Council delegation. Not threatening, but clearly tactical. What are you doing? Rixtal demanded. Showing you why Earth sent an admiral instead of a diplomat. Chin's voice carried absolute confidence now. You see, Ambassador, humanity has a different perspective on threats than most species. When we encounter a superior force that demands our submission, we don't surrender. We fight. Admiral, your species' weapons are primitive chemical projectiles. Your ships are barely capable of interplanetary travel. The Council has defeated civilizations with technology thousands of years beyond yours. Yes, Chin agreed. But those civilizations probably fought the kind of wars you understand. Clean wars. Civilized wars. Wars with rules and limitations and concern for collateral damage. Rixtal felt a chill that had nothing to do with the lunar environment. What kind of wars do humans fight? The kind we win. Before Rixtal could respond, his aide's frantic clicking drew his attention to the sensor display. Throughout their conversation, more human vessels had been arriving in system. What had started as a few dozen ships had grown to over 300, and the energy signatures were all wrong. Admiral, our sensors indicate your fleet has increased substantially during our meeting. Yes, those vessels, they're not showing the energy signatures we'd expect from fusion-powered craft. No, they're not. Rixtal stared at the sensor display in growing horror. The human vessels were showing power outputs that suggested technology far beyond what their initial scans had indicated. Not just beyond their expectations, but beyond the technology of most Council member species. That's impossible. Our surveys indicated primitive technology. Your surveys saw exactly what we wanted them to see, Chin replied calmly. Humanity learned long ago that showing your true strength to potential enemies is generally a mistake. You deceived us. We defended ourselves. There's a difference. Rixtal's mind raced through the implications. If humanity had deliberately concealed their true technological capabilities, if their fleet was far larger and more advanced than Council intelligence indicated, then this first contact meeting wasn't what he'd thought at all. What do you want? He asked quietly. For your Council to leave our space and never return. For humanity to be left alone to develop as we choose. For the word to spread throughout your galactic community that Earth is not a target for conquest or integration. And if the Council refuses? Chin's smile was visible through her faceplate, and it was not reassuring. Then, the galaxy will learn why evolution spent millions of years teaching humans to be the most effective predators on a planet full of predators. The meeting ended with polite farewells and ceremonial exchanges of basic information, but Rixtal knew everything had changed. As the Harmony's call lifted off from the lunar surface and began its journey back to Council space, he stood on the observation deck watching the human fleet. 300 vessels. Energy signatures suggesting antimatter reactors. Weapon systems that his ship's computers couldn't properly classify. And, somewhere behind it all, a species that had spent their entire evolutionary history learning to fight and win against impossible odds. For the first time in his long diplomatic career, Ambassador Rixtal began composing a report that recommended retreat. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened within hours of Ambassador Rixtal's return to Nexus Prime, the Council's massive capital station orbiting a neutron star in the galaxy's central hub. Representatives from the core worlds had gathered in unprecedented haste, their atmospheric pods arranged in tight circles around the central speaking platform rather than the usual ceremonial formation. Speaker Kethlar's compound eyes reflected agitation as he absorbed Riksdal's report for the third time. Around the chamber, delegates whispered among themselves in dozens of languages, their translation matrices creating a constant hum of overlapping conversations. Ambassador, Kethlar finally spoke. I want to ensure I understand your report correctly. You're claiming this human species not only refused council membership, but actively concealed their technological capabilities from our surveys. Rikstal stood at the center of the speaking circle, his blue skin several shades paler than usual. Yes, Speaker. Every indication suggests they deliberately presented themselves as primitive to avoid council attention while developing advanced technology. The crystalline Vorthak representative resonated at a frequency that translated as incredulous laughter. Impossible. No species develops antimatter technology without detectable energy signatures. Our surveys monitor fusion development across thousands of light years. That's what I thought, Rikstal replied. But their fleet displayed energy outputs consistent with antimatter reactors, and our ship's computers couldn't properly classify their weapons systems. Defense Coordinator Thaxmol, whose cybernetic implants glowed softly around his organic Centaurian features, leaned forward in his command pod. 300 vessels, you said? That exceeds the defensive fleets of most established member worlds. And that was just what they showed us, Rikstal emphasized. Admiral Chen implied it was a fraction of their total capability. Admiral, repeated science advisor Velterra, her serpentine form coiling tighter around her platform. They sent a military commander instead of a diplomat. That alone should have been a warning sign. Speaker Kethlar raised two of his arms for silence. Let's focus on facts rather than implications. Ambassador, did they demonstrate any hostile intent beyond their refusal to join? Not directly, but their entire approach suggested they viewed the council as a potential threat rather than a benefactor. When I explained that council protection was not optional, Admiral Chen made it clear that humanity would resist any attempt at forced integration. A new voice entered the discussion. Grand Admiral Zetkor, the council's supreme military commander, materialized via holographic projection from his flagship in distant space. His insectoid features showed no emotion, but his mandibles clicked in patterns that suggested deep thought. Ambassador, describe the human fleet's positioning during your meeting. Rikstal consulted his notes. They maintained defensive formations throughout. Their main vessel landed at the meeting site, while others took orbital positions around the moon. Very precise, very professional. Military precision suggests military training. How long did they have to prepare for your arrival? We announced our approach 3 days in advance, as per standard protocol. Zekkor's mandibles clicked faster. Insufficient time to assemble a fleet unless it was already prepared. This suggests the humans have been anticipating first contact and planning their response. The implications sent a ripple of unease through the assembled delegates. Species rarely prepared for first contact beyond selecting diplomatic representatives. The idea that humans had been planning a military response suggested a fundamentally different mindset. Grand Admiral, spoke the Melodian delegate, her crystalline voice chiming with concern. What is your assessment of the threat level? Unknown. We have no combat data on human capabilities. Their technology appears more advanced than our intelligence indicated, but we don't know how much more advanced. We also don't understand their tactical doctrine or strategic thinking. Speaker Kethlar felt the weight of 3 centuries of peaceful expansions being challenged by a single species. What are our options? 3 possibilities, Zetkor replied. First, we accept their refusal and leave them alone. Second, we initiate economic and diplomatic pressure to encourage voluntary compliance. Third, we use military force to ensure integration. The chamber fell silent as delegates contemplated these options. For 10,000 years, the Galactic Council had never faced meaningful resistance to its authority. Member species were protected, guided, and gradually elevated to full galactic citizenship. The system worked precisely because it was obviously beneficial and overwhelmingly powerful. The first option is unacceptable, declared the Vorthak representative. If word spreads that species can simply refuse council authority, it undermines our entire governance structure. Agreed, added the Centaurian delegate. We cannot allow precedent for refusal to be established. What about the second option? Asked Velterra. Economic pressure has proven effective in encouraging compliance from reluctant species. Defense Coordinator Thaxmol shook his head. Humans are isolated in their system with no interstellar trade relationships. Economic pressure requires existing dependencies. All attention turned to Grand Admiral Zet Kor, whose projection flickered slightly as he consulted data streams from across the fleet. Military force remains viable. Human technology appears advanced, but not beyond Council capabilities. Their fleet of 300 vessels could be overwhelmed by a single sector battle group. How certain are you? Keflar asked. 70% confidence based on available data. The unknown factor is their tactical capabilities and whether they possess additional hidden assets. 70%, Keflar repeated thoughtfully. In 3 centuries of Council expansion, we've never faced odds that low. Which is precisely why we must act, interjected Admiral Ketmara of the Altarian Navy. If we allow doubt about Council authority to spread, other species may begin to question their membership. Better to resolve this quickly and decisively. Speaker Keflar found himself at the center of the most significant decision in Council history. Everything they had built, everything they represented, faced challenge from a single primitive species on the galactic rim. Grand Admiral, what would you require for a successful operation? 2 sector battle groups. Approximately 800 vessels, including support craft. Standard intimidation approach. Overwhelming force demonstration followed by surrender demands. Most species capitulate when they realize the futility of resistance. And if humans don't surrender? Then, we demonstrate why resistance is futile. The vote was close but decisive. 41 delegates supported military action, 6 opposed, with 7 abstentions. The Galactic Council would send its fleet to the Sol system with orders to integrate humanity into the galactic community by any means necessary. 3 weeks later, Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the command center deep beneath the North American Defense Complex, her eyes fixed on holographic displays showing the outer solar system. Around her, dozens of officers monitored sensor feeds, communication networks, and fleet positions with quiet efficiency. Admiral, called her intelligence officer. Long-range sensors are detecting massive gravimetric disturbances at the edge of the system. Pattern analysis suggests multiple large vessels dropping out of faster-than-light travel. How many? Still counting, ma'am. Current estimate suggests over 800 contacts. Chen nodded grimly. Humanity's deep space monitoring stations had detected the Council fleet's approach 3 days ago, providing crucial preparation time. The numbers matched intelligence projections. Overwhelming force designed to make resistance seem hopeless. Status of home fleet? All vessels report ready. Defensive positions established around Earth and Mars. Deep space squadrons are maintaining concealment in the asteroid belt as planned. Lunar installations? Armed and tracking. We have target locks on the lead Council vessels. Chen studied the tactical display showing the approaching alien fleet. 800 vessels represented more firepower than human civilization had ever faced. But humanity had learned harsh lessons about facing superior enemies. Sometimes the only way to win was to change the rules of engagement. Communications, open a channel to the Council fleet. Channel open, Admiral. Attention Galactic Council fleet. This is Admiral Sarah Chun of the United Nations Space Command. You are entering sovereign human space without permission. State your intentions. The response came within minutes, broadcast on multiple frequencies with mathematical precision. Admiral Chun. This is Grand Admiral Zet Kor commanding the Council Integration Fleet. We have come to complete humanity's integration into the galactic community. Surrender your vessels, and prepare to receive transition teams. I'm afraid that's not acceptable, Grand Admiral. Humanity has declined Council membership. We require you to withdraw from our system immediately. Admiral Chun, you appear to misunderstand the situation. Council membership is not optional for spacefaring species. Your resistance will only increase the difficulty of your eventual integration. Chen glanced around the command center, noting the calm professionalism of her staff. 3 years of preparation had led to this moment. 3 years of building, planning, and preparing for exactly this scenario. Grand Admiral, I think you're the one who misunderstands the situation. Humanity spent a very long time being conquered by superior forces. We learned from those experiences. Admiral, our fleet comprises 800 vessels with technology thousands of years beyond your current capabilities. Resistance is not merely futile, it is impossible. Is that your final position? It is reality. Chen nodded to her communications officer, who cut the channel. Around the command center, status boards began lighting up as hidden installations throughout the solar system came online. Humanity's true defensive network revealed itself for the first time. All stations report ready, Admiral. Execute Operation Prometheus. The Council fleet had taken position at the edge of the solar system in standard intimidation formation. Massive dreadnoughts at the center surrounded by concentric rings of cruisers, destroyers, and support vessels. The formation was designed to demonstrate overwhelming power while maintaining defensive flexibility. Grand Admiral Zetkor reviewed the human fleet positions with satisfaction. Approximately 300 vessels clustered around their homeworld in typical primitive defensive posture. No attempt at offensive positioning, no indication of advanced tactical thinking. Exactly what he'd expected from a recently spacefaring species. Admiral, his tactical officer reported, we're detecting energy buildups throughout the human system. Unknown signatures. Elaborate. Multiple sources, Admiral. Appears to be some kind of charging cycle. Pattern suggests coordinated activation of defensive installations. Zetkor felt a flicker of unease. Defensive installations were normal for an inhabited system, but the energy readings exceeded anything he'd seen from a primitive civilization. Any attempt at communication from human forces? Negative, Admiral. They've maintained radio silence since their initial response. Very well. Begin the demonstration. I want a full spread of warning shots across their fleet positions. Show them what they're facing. The Council fleet opened fire with precisely calibrated energy weapons, sending brilliant beams of coherent light across space to detonate harmlessly near the human fleet. It was standard procedure. Demonstrate overwhelming firepower without causing casualties, allowing the enemy to surrender with honor intact. The human response was immediate and completely unexpected. Every human vessel in the system opened fire simultaneously, not with primitive chemical weapons or basic energy beams, but with weapons that made Zetkor's tactical computers scream warnings about impossible energy readings. Streams of antimatter particles lanced across space with targeting precision that exceeded Council military standards. Force beams that twisted space-time itself reached out to grab Council vessels and crushed them like insects. Most horrifying of all, weapons that appeared to manipulate matter at the quantum level began dissolving Council ships from the inside out. Evasive maneuvers. Zetkor shouted over the chaos of his bridge. All vessels, emergency scatter. But it was already too late. The human ambush had been perfectly coordinated. Hidden installations throughout the asteroid belt revealed themselves as massive weapons platforms, while concealed ships emerged from behind moons and planetoids to catch the Council fleet in crossfire. In the first 30 seconds of combat, humanity destroyed over 200 Council vessels. Admiral, his communications officer called desperately. We're receiving priority transmissions from multiple ships. Damage reports across the fleet. Zetkor stared at his tactical display in disbelief. Symbols representing Council vessels were disappearing faster than his computers could update. The humans weren't just fighting back, they were winning. How is this possible, he whispered. His science officer provided the answer in a trembling voice. Admiral, preliminary analysis suggests human weapons technology exceeds our own by several centuries. They're not a primitive species. They're more advanced than we are. The realization struck Zetkor like a physical blow. The Council hadn't tried to integrate a primitive civilization. They'd launched an unprovoked attack against a superior military power. Sir, his tactical officer reported, human forces are broadcasting a message. Put it through. Admiral Chen's voice filled the bridge with calm authority. Grand Admiral Zetkor, this is Admiral Chen. Your fleet is surrounded and outgunned. I'm prepared to accept your surrender. Admiral, Zetkor replied, his voice tight with shock, I don't understand. Our surveys indicated primitive technology. Your surveys detected exactly what we wanted them to detect. Humanity learned a long time ago that appearing weak to potential enemies is an excellent survival strategy. What are your terms? Immediate withdrawal from our system. Cessation of all Council expansion activities in this galactic region. A guarantee that humanity will be left to develop without interference. I don't have authority to make such agreements. Then, I suggest you contact someone who does. The Council fleet limped out of the Sol system 12 hours later, leaving behind nearly 400 destroyed vessels and carrying the most shocking military defeat in galactic history. As Grand Admiral Zetkor composed his report to the Council, he realized that everything had changed. Humanity wasn't a primitive species to be integrated. They were apex predators who had been watching the galaxy for decades, learning about their potential enemies, and preparing for war. And now the galaxy knew that the Galactic Council could be defeated. The age of unchallenged Council authority was over 0.6 months after the Battle of Sol, the galaxy had become a very different place. News of the Council's defeat spread through trade networks, diplomatic channels, and refugee communications with the speed of wildfire. For the first time in galactic history, the Council's authority had been successfully challenged. Speaker Keflar stood alone in his private chambers aboard Nexus Prime, staring through reinforced transparent aluminum at the neutron star beyond. His compound eyes reflected the shifting patterns of exotic radiation, but his mind was focused on the crisis reports flooding his desk. 17 Council member worlds had formally requested protection from potential human expansion. 23 others had begun developing independent military capabilities in violation of Council regulations. And, most disturbing of all, 9 systems had declared their intention to withdraw from Council membership entirely. A soft chime announced an incoming communication. Speaker, Grand Admiral Zetkor requests immediate audience. Send him in. Zetkor entered with the measured stride of a career military officer, but Keflar noticed subtle changes in his bearing. The absolute confidence that had characterized the Grand Admiral's previous appearances was gone, replaced by something harder and more cautious. Report, Grand Admiral. The situation continues to deteriorate, Speaker. Our intelligence services confirm that at least 30 species are now actively seeking direct contact with humanity, presumably to negotiate defense agreements or technology transfers. Without Council authorization, without Council knowledge in most cases, the humans appear to be selectively responding to these approaches, though we haven't determined their criteria for engagement. Keflar processed this information with growing concern. What do we know about human activities since the battle? Very little. They've maintained strict control over their system borders. No unauthorized vessels are permitted entry, and they've established what they call early warning networks throughout surrounding sectors. Early warning networks? Automated monitoring stations capable of detecting fleet movements across a substantial region. The implication is that they're prepared to respond to any future Council military action before we could achieve surprise. Keflar felt the weight of 10,000 years of galactic order pressing down on his shoulders. And our own military situation? Zetkor's mandibles clicked in patterns indicating deep unease. Problematic. The fleet losses at Sol represent our worst military disaster in recorded history. More importantly, the tactical analysis of human weapons technology suggests we're facing a fundamental capability gap. Explain. Their antimatter manipulation technology is at least 2 centuries beyond our current capabilities. Their force manipulation weapons appear to operate on principles our scientists don't fully understand. And their targeting and coordination systems demonstrate processing power that exceeds our best battle computers. How is that possible? Our surveys indicated they'd only recently achieved fusion technology. Because we were looking for the wrong indicators, Zetkor replied grimly. Human technology development followed a completely different path than standard galactic progression. They apparently achieved breakthrough physics discoveries while deliberately maintaining the appearance of primitive energy systems. A new voice interrupted their conversation. Science advisor Velterra entered the chamber without announcement, her serpentine form coiled with agitation. Speaker, I apologize for the intrusion, but we've received intelligence that changes everything. What kind of intelligence? We've been contacted by a species calling themselves the Kethmoran Confederation. They claim to represent a coalition of civilizations that have been monitoring human development for several centuries. Keflar's compound eyes widened. Monitoring from where? There are no advanced civilizations in that galactic region. There weren't supposed to be, Velterra corrected. The Kethmoran claim they've been maintaining deliberate isolation while observing younger species develop. According to their representative, humanity is not the only species to have achieved advanced development outside Council oversight. How many species are we talking about? At least 12 confirmed civilizations with technology equal to or exceeding Council standards. They've been sharing information and resources while avoiding Council attention for thousands of years. The implication struck Keflar like a physical blow. If multiple advanced civilizations existed outside Council authority, everything he believed about galactic governance was wrong. What do they want? They're offering to mediate between the Council and humanity. Their representative suggests that continued conflict would be inadvisable for all parties involved. Grand Admiral Zetkor leaned forward in his chair. Is that a threat? I believe so, Velterra replied, though phrased very diplomatically. Before Keflar could respond, another chime announced an urgent communication. Speaker, We're receiving a priority transmission from human space. Admiral Chun is requesting immediate conference with Council leadership. Put her through. Admiral Chun appeared via holographic projection in the center of the chamber, her image sharp and clear despite the vast distance between Sol and Nexus Prime. She wore dress uniform rather than the environmental suit from their previous meeting, and her expression carried the confidence of someone negotiating from a position of strength. Speaker Keflar, Grand Admiral Zetkor. Thank you for accepting my communication. Admiral Chun, Keflar replied carefully. I assume you're contacting us regarding the current tensions between our civilizations. In part. But I'm primarily here to discuss the future of this galaxy and humanity's role in it. I'm listening. Shin gestured, and a holographic star map appeared beside her image. Over the past 6 months, humanity has been contacted by numerous species seeking alternatives to Council membership. Some want military protection, others want technology transfers, and many simply want recognition as independent civilizations. The Council has always provided those services to member species, under Council authority and Council control. What these species want is partnership, not patronage. The distinction cut deep because it was accurate. Council membership had always been structured around central authority managing all interspecies relationships. The idea of independent partnerships between species had never been considered. What are you proposing, Admiral? A new model for galactic governance. Instead of one central authority controlling everything, we establish multiple regional confederations that work together on common interests while maintaining their independence. That sounds like a recipe for conflict and chaos. Chin's smile was patient but firm. Speaker, with respect, your current model has already led to conflict. The galaxy is full of species that joined the Council because they had no other choice, not because they believed in your system. And you think they prefer human authority to Council guidance? Not human authority. No authority. That's the point. Humanity isn't seeking to replace the Council as the galaxy's ruler. We're suggesting that maybe the galaxy doesn't need rulers at all. Grand Admiral Zetkor interjected. Admiral, without central authority, how do you prevent conflicts between species with competing interests? The same way you prevent conflicts between people with competing interests. Negotiation, compromise, and, when necessary, collective action against aggressors. And if that fails, then species that can't coexist peacefully maintain separation until they can. It's not perfect, but it's better than forced unity under threat of conquest. The chamber fell silent as the Council leadership absorbed Chen's proposal. Keflar recognized the fundamental challenge to everything the Council represented, but he also saw the logic in her position. Admiral, even if we agreed to such a system, the transition would be enormously complex. The Council currently coordinates resource distribution, conflict resolution, and technological development for thousands of species across hundreds of sectors. Which is why the transition would take decades and require cooperation from all parties, Chen replied. But the alternative is continued resistance to Council authority spreading throughout the galaxy until your system collapses completely. Is that a threat? It's an observation based on the intelligence we've gathered over the past 6 months. 17 species have formally requested human protection from potential Council retaliation. 43 others have opened diplomatic channels seeking alternative arrangements. The Kethmoran Confederation represents 12 advanced civilizations that never accepted Council authority in the first place. The numbers were devastating. Keflar realized that the Council's apparent universal acceptance had been an illusion built on overwhelming force and lack of alternatives. What specifically are you proposing? Chen's expression became more formal. Immediate cessation of forced integration activities, recognition of the right of species to choose their own governmental structures and alliances, establishment of neutral territories for species that prefer independence, and gradual transition of current Council territories to regional confederation models. And in return, humanity provides technological assistance for peaceful development, military protection for species threatened by aggressive neighbors, and partnership in addressing galaxy-wide challenges that require cooperative solutions, such as resource depletion, pandemic disease control, asteroid impact prevention, stellar engineering projects. The kinds of challenges that affect everyone regardless of political structure. Keflar found himself genuinely considering the proposal despite its radical nature. How would regional confederations be organized? By mutual agreement among participating species. Some might choose geographic proximity, others cultural compatibility, still others economic integration. The key is voluntary association rather than imposed authority. And disputes between confederations? Handled through diplomatic negotiation with neutral mediation when necessary. Humanity would participate in such mediation, but wouldn't dominate it. Grand Admiral Zetkor raised a crucial point. Admiral, this system sounds idealistic, but what prevents a confederation from becoming aggressive toward its neighbors? What stops the emergence of new empire builders? Collective defense agreements among confederations, combined with technological development that makes conquest economically and profitable. When every confederation has access to advanced defensive technology, aggressive expansion becomes too costly to attempt. The conversation continued for 3 hours, covering everything from trade regulation to scientific research coordination to refugee protection. By the end, Keflar found himself facing the most difficult decision of his long career. The council could reject Qin's proposal and continue trying to maintain authority through military force. But the Battle of Seoul had demonstrated the limits of that approach, and resistance was clearly spreading. Alternatively, they could embrace radical change and help build a new model for galactic governance. Admiral, I'll need to consult with the full council before making any formal response to your proposal. Of course. But, Speaker, I should mention that several species have already begun implementing confederation models in their regions. The transition is happening whether the council participates or not. After Qin's transmission ended, Keflar sat in contemplative silence for long minutes. Finally, he turned to his advisors. Recommendations? Volterra spoke first. The proposal has merit, but implementation would be extraordinarily complex. We'd essentially be dismantling 10,000 years of governmental structure. The alternative may be watching it collapse anyway, Zetkor observed. Military force is no longer a reliable tool for maintaining authority, and political resistance is spreading faster than we can contain it. Keflar nodded slowly. Contact the regional governors. We're calling an emergency session of the full council. It's time to decide whether we adapt to changing circumstances or become irrelevant to them. The emergency session convened 1 week later with representatives from every council region in attendance. The debate lasted for days, covering every aspect of Qin's proposal and its potential consequences. Some delegates argued for continued resistance, others for immediate implementation of radical change. In the end, the vote was closer than anyone expected, 52% in favor of beginning transition negotiations with humanity, and the emerging confederations, 48% opposed. The narrowest margin in council history, but sufficient to authorize Speaker Keflar to begin formal discussions. 3 months later, Keflar found himself aboard a human vessel in neutral space, participating in the first Interconfederation Congress. Representatives from 47 different governmental structures sat around a massive circular table, discussing everything from trade standards to mutual defense agreements. Admiral Chun served as the meeting's facilitator, but she wielded no authority over the proceedings. Decisions were made by consensus or majority vote, with no single species or confederation holding dominant power. The Centauri Confederation proposes establishment of standardized refugee protection protocols, announced the representative from humanity's nearest neighbors. The Vegan Alliance seconds the proposal, added another delegate. The proposal seems reasonable, Keflar interjected, but implementation would require coordination between security services across multiple confederations. Which is why we're establishing the Interconfederation Coordination Committee, Chen explained. Voluntary participation, shared resources, common protocols for issues that affect everyone. As the discussions continued, Keflar realized he was witnessing something unprecedented, truly voluntary cooperation between spacefaring civilizations. No threats, no imposed authority, no forced compliance. Just intelligent beings working together to solve common problems. It wasn't perfect. Disagreements arose regularly, and some issues remained unresolved after hours of debate. But it was working. More importantly, it was sustainable in ways the old council system had never been. During a break in the proceedings, Chen approached Keflar privately. Speaker, I wanted to thank you for your willingness to consider change. I know it couldn't have been easy. Admiral, I spent 3 centuries believing that order required authority, that cooperation required control. You've shown me that wasn't true. Humanity learned the same lesson the hard way, Chen replied. We spent most of our history conquering and being conquered. It took us a very long time to realize that voluntary cooperation is stronger than forced unity. And now you're teaching the galaxy. We're learning together. That's what makes it work. 6 years later, the transformation was complete. The old Galactic Council had been replaced by 17 regional confederations, 3 independent systems, and 12 neutral zones. Conflicts still occurred, but they were resolved through negotiation rather than conquest. Technology flowed freely between cooperating civilizations, and no single power dominated galactic affairs. Keflar, now serving as chairman of the Interconfederation Coordination Committee, often reflected on the changes. Humanity had offered the galaxy something it had never experienced: genuine choice about its own governance. The species that had expected to meet primitive diplomats had instead encountered something far more dangerous to the old order. Beings who understood that true strength came not from the ability to impose your will on others, but from the wisdom to build systems where imposing your will became unnecessary. In the end, Admiral Chun had been right about one thing. Humanity didn't fight the kind of wars the galaxy understood. They fought wars of ideas, and those were the only wars that could change everything forever.